Since the beginning of time, mankind has bickered over many subjects that have nearly led to the end of our species. Which religion is better, which country is superior, and most importantly, which Halo game is the best. This last example has led to many ongoing conflicts spanning almost 20 years after the second Halo was released, and to this day people are still at war with each other, trying to determine which is the best in the franchise, which is why I've taken it upon myself to throw in my 2 cents, without getting my head blown off by anyone with a different opinion. Jokes aside, it's good that so many people have different opinions on which Halo game is the best, because that means that so many of them have great attributes. Halo has evolved so much since 2001, and it's seen some incredible highs, incredible lows, and everything in between, and people base their opinion on a multitude of different factors. Some may like a Halo game because to them it has the best soundtrack, or campaign, or custom games, or armor customization, and I have based my favourite Halo game on some of these attributes. Halo is an iconic franchise, and that's not just due to its addictive multiplayer, but the actual story surrounding Halo. From the main story to the spin-offs, the world of Halo is jam-packed with lore, which has led to countless novels, comics, an anime, and even a TV show, though you'd think there was no source material whatsoever with how the last one turned out. It's definitely the most intriguing part of Halo, and although 343 has taken a lot of the fun out of Halo storytelling, there's no doubting the brilliance of Bungie's great plots and characters. Of course, some people may just like a campaign because it was their first experience playing a Halo story, and that's one of the reasons why this particular Halo campaign is my favourite. I guess I should just say it already. In my opinion, Halo Reach has the best campaign. Now please just hear me out, Halo 2 and 3 purists.
What you say is heresy, is it?
Yes, we didn't get to play as Chief. Yes, Noble Team wasn't as fleshed out as they could have been. And yes, I know the game essentially shits all over the iconic Fall of Reach novel. But come on, Halo Reach's story has so many great attributes, and it's a standout in the series for me personally. Like I said, I am a little bit biased towards Halo Reach, because while I did play Halo 3 and Halo Wars before ever playing Reach, Halo Reach was the first time I genuinely sat down and played all the way through a Halo campaign. And of course I love these other campaigns too, but Reach as a whole just scratches the feel-good spot in my brain, and I want to share why. Keep in mind, this video will only be focusing on the thematic elements of the game, rather than its actual gameplay. Everyone knows the Halo community's opinion of Reach's gameplay is mixed. Some love it, some hate it. I really enjoy it, but it's not what interests me about Reach. Yeah, it's typical fun Halo gameplay mixed in with some new elements like armor abilities, assassinations, and that goddamn bloom mechanic. But the stuff that isn't exclusive to a video game, i.e. soundtrack, narrative, world building, those kind of things have kept me playing this game for years. Oh no, sorry, scratch that. Another big reason I play Reach is because of its groundbreaking forklift gameplay. Halo's storytelling was unmatched during the Bungie era in terms of first-person shooters in my opinion. The main trilogy especially was great at telling a compelling story without the protagonist talking all the time. We as the player observed this strange and alien world through Chief, and things like level design, enemies, and other more talkative characters in the campaigns would help us understand exactly what was going on. The first 3 games, of course, focused on the one-man army, Master Chief, as he battled endless waves of Covenant to save humanity from total annihilation, all the while striking cool poses, making new friends, and losing old friends along the way. While the plots of the games are simple enough, they are executed perfectly with the great writing and performances that, if not done correctly, could have turned the story into a joke, rather than the 3-piece meal masterpiece it turned out to be. After creating a memorable, overarching story over the course of several years, many authors like to dive back into their already existing and sometimes concluded universes to tell another story that branches out from the main narrative. These tend to tell the origins of certain characters in those universes, or sometimes just focus on completely different characters altogether, while still remaining in the same universe as previous stories. Sometimes these kinds of stories are great for expanding the worlds they belong to, and other times they are just used for monetary gain. Excluding the sequels that came after 3, there were spin-off games that focused on more obscure parts of the Halo universe. However, Reach can't really be considered a spin-off game, because it is a direct prequel to Halo Combat Evolved, so it is essentially the very beginning of the main trilogy. Unlike ODST and Halo Wars that kind of do their own thing, Reach offers a very different experience than what we became used to with Halo 1, 2 and 3, as it feels a lot darker and grounded in tone. I know calling a Halo game grounded sounds a bit mental, but to me the grittiness and dark tone makes it feel more real when compared to the fantastical power fantasies we had become used to. A big leading factor for this change was the switch in protagonist from Chief to Noble 6. Though some may find it painful to not play as the big green boy, the story greatly benefits from having him sit out fact as it allows for a lot more creative freedom. For years, Bungie would refer to Reach through throwaway dialogue and small details here and there.
Something's not right. The fleet that destroyed Reach was 50 times this size.
There it is! There it is!
Of course, anyone who can't read like myself was unaware of the lore that was already established in the Fall of Reach novel, but as we all know, reading's for nerds, so true gamers like myself had to wait 9 years after the novel was released to actually get a hands-on experience of the horrors that befell the tragic planet. The player character is Noble Six, aka Hyper-Lethal. Unlike the Master Chief, who is a well-established character in the Halo universe, not much is known about Noble Six in terms of their history, but that's done to let you slip into the role of Six easier, allowing us as players to fill in the blanks. But I mean, the best way the game made you truly feel like a Spartan was letting you customize Six. This was a great way to get the player interested in what's essentially a generic soldier who doesn't have the badassery of Chief. The story of Reach begins with our Spartan getting transferred to Noble Team and taking up the call sign Noble Six after the old Noble Six, Tom, blew himself up like a dumbass. In your team there's Carter, the leader, Kat, the techie, George, the big guy, Emil, the edgy one, and June, the cocky sniper. As a team you get ordered to investigate a local settlement after a squad of Marines went radio silent, and it's believed that rebels may be responsible. Why Holland would send 6 Spartans to kill some rebels is beyond me, but his decision turns out to be the right call, because it ain't rebels killing locals and Marines, but a small Covenant strike force, seeking out key artifacts and information. After telling Holland about the Covenant presence on Reach, Noble Team is assigned to go on special missions across the planet to try and fight back the ever-growing forces of the Covenant, and already knowing that Reach fell prior to this game releasing makes Noble Team's and the UNSC's efforts that much more tragic, because you know that most of it will be for nothing, but not everything at least. This is one of the reasons why I enjoy the campaign so much, as it's not a typical Halo experience. Classic Halo was all about beating up the bad guys and saving the day. Yeah, there were some serious and at times sad moments, but overall you knew Chief was going to win, but Reach isn't like this at all. Yeah, Reach basically ends showing that without Noble Team, humanity wouldn't have won the war, but the game is shrouded in a grounded and gritty feeling that always sticks with you. Usually when completing an objective in classic Halo, it shows a slight shift in power in humanity's favour, and you can feel the after effects of these victories later in the games too, and Reach for the first third of the game follows this tradition as you and your squad complete objectives. Things start to look good, and you think, oh, maybe things will be different this time, but then the game quickly reminds you that Reach won't have a happy ending.
No, somebody tell me this ain't happening.
UNSC frigate Grafton, do you copy?
Grafton is dust. We need to get out of here now.
As the game goes on, every time you take a step forward, you immediately take 3 steps back, and you can start to see the desperation of the UNSC grow as their objective goes from fighting the Covenant to get them off Reach, to fighting the Covenant so they can evacuate Reach. This sort of downtrodden feeling was necessary though, to live up to all the foreshadowing Bungie had done in the past about Reach, and show how much of a significant loss it was to humanity, and it actually portrays the Covenant in a competent light. Now, I'm not having a go at the Covenant, they are one of the most recognisable enemy factions when it comes to video games, but let's be honest, they've never really felt very intimidating. Yeah, Hunters are pretty intimidating, and Jackal Snipers from Halo 2 make the devil himself shiver, but overall they're not the most threatening enemies out there, especially after seeing Chief pistol whip so many of them to death. The classic trilogy also inadvertently makes them feel less threatening with each game. The first game, yeah okay, they were new, so they put a little bit of fear in you, but then the game introduces the actual scary faction in the game, the Flood, so from then on every interaction you have with the Covenant is met with a sigh of relief, as you think to yourself, thank God it's not those creepy bastards again. Their combat dialogue is also notoriously hilarious in the first game, and has been the centre of many jokes online over recent years. Okay, so Combat Evolved made the Covenant iconic, but not intimidating. Maybe the sequel can change that. And while yeah, Halo 2 did a good job at expanding the lore of the Covenant, and establishing how they actually operate in their society, the game humanises them enough that we can relate to them, like the Arbiter. We get to see the war through their eyes, and actually play as the Arbiter through a lot of the campaign. Grunts are still cannon fodder, brutes are dumb, the Prophets are just old geezers in mobility scooters, and the elites end up turning on the Covenant and joining the boys in green. Then of course Halo 3 doubles down on this by having Arbiter and Chief become best mates, and the Covenant continues to be played for laughs. Again, I'm not complaining about how the Covenant was used, because it was done on purpose. You were always meant to feel like the imposing force, rather than the one being imposed, and Reach flips this formula on its head. The first time you come into contact with the Covenant is when you see a skirmish let out a warning cry to its fellow Covenant buddies. The bird-like screech it lets out is so violent and animalistic that it completely catches you off guard. Most of the time in the classic games we were able to understand what enemies were saying, because, well, they spoke perfect English, which in itself was pretty comedic, because seeing something that looked like this, say this,
It's good to get exercise.
was bound to be funny. This was completely changed in Reach, as none of the enemies speak English, and instead only speak in their native languages, which of course we can't understand. This creates a war between us and the enemies, because we can't understand any of them, which makes them feel more unpredictable than they've ever been. They could be shouting anything at us. Spartan, you have a tiny dick. Even grunts, who are played up as jokes in every game, don't shout for help or anything, and instead mumble in a much deeper tone, which makes them less funny and more creepy. Dehumanizing the Covenant was a great way of showing how humans saw them at the time, an animalistic army hell-bent on wiping them out. Brutes and elites finally got their due as well, as the goofy voice lines from previous games were changed out for growls and roars that commanded respect and made them feel like real threats. The new design choices implemented in the game were also really effective at visualizing the Covenant's authority of Reach. Halo is known for having a bright and varied colour palette. Characters, enemies and vehicles pop thanks to their dazzling colours bouncing off of the more natural colours of the levels they were a part of. However, since Reach was going for a darker tone, it made sense for the art style to change slightly as well. Not too much to the point where the game would lose its identity as a Halo game, insert Halo 4 and 5, but enough to complement this new direction with the storytelling, and honestly I'm such a huge fan of it. It gives the game this gritty feeling, as I've already said, but another thing I like about it is how it changed the looks of the enemies ever so slightly, making them look far more alien than they ever did before. Brutes went from silly looking gorillas with soy beards to dinosaurs. Jackals and skirmishers were given an even more avian design, making them look like Big Bird if he had a smack addiction. Grunts still looked a bit goofy to be fair, but the best change in terms of the design was the elites, as you can actually feel their dangerous presence on screen. Classic elites were just used as tougher foot soldiers when it came to Combat Evolved, but even then they weren't that tough. Halo 2 they were pretty much the same, and in 3 they were your friends. Halo Reach said, fuck that, these guys are going to be scary.
What's the status? Over!
We've been engaged! Bad guy coming out!
That cutscene alone is so good for showing you just how ferocious and dangerous the elites were. Showing a group of Spartans, not Marines, Spartans, get alarmed by the presence of a couple of elites makes them feel so much more powerful and imposing than they had ever been before. Their designs as well are just amazing. I know in lore elites are pretty tall, but this game really shows you how tall they are, as they tower over you in every firefight. They actually live up to their names as elites in this game, as they feel like the best of the best, and their armour variants hone in on this idea. Completely reinventing how we saw the Covenant was a genius move from Bungie, as it makes the stakes of the game feel that much higher, and in turn makes for a much more darker and unsettling experience. Sometimes things are funner with friends, like watching a film, playing video games, going for a pint, or watching a planet crumble around you, and Halo Reach lets you share this fun time with your new friends in Noble Team, 6 Spartans who fill a specific role. Carter is the leader of the squad, keeping his teammates focused on the objective whilst being the mouthpiece for them, as he is the one Holland and Dr. Halsey communicate with. Kat is the problem solver, often coming up with the solutions to the problems the team may face. George is the anchor of the team, and the one who will do anything to help, and is probably the most caring of the bunch. Emil is the guy who stares into space and doesn't talk often, and laughs at serious moments, so you know he's the cool one. June is the scout, who does a lot of the recon, and tends to keep to himself, but in a more Sigma way than Emil. And then there's Noble 6, whose personality trait is murder. A problem a lot of people have with Noble Team is that they feel a little bit underdeveloped and don't have much to their personalities besides those tropes I mentioned, and I'd have to agree with them. While I do like Noble Team and most of its members, there isn't much going for them in terms of depth, save George, who is the GOAT by the way. But what I do like about them is how they feel like they each represent a characteristic of Master Chief. Throughout the first trilogy we saw Chief be a leader on the battlefield, as he was always the first one to get into action. He was also great at overcoming obstacles, thinking on his feet, was often sent to investigate Covenant activities on recon missions, was always determined to try and save everyone he could, and kept his humanity, looked like a badass the entire time, and was excellent at murdering Covenant. Noble Team was also great at showing just how powerful the Master Chief actually was, as not even a team of 6 highly skilled Spartans could stop Reach's inevitable fall, whereas John was saving humanity for fun on the regular. Despite their one-dimensional personalities, their deaths were still pretty tragic, as almost every character gave everything they had to try and save Reach. Except June, of course, he's too Sigma to die. Although they couldn't save Reach, every single one of them can be thanked for saving the rest of humanity, as without their efforts, Cortana would have never made it to Master Chief, which ultimately would have led to humanity's demise. Much like how you need a compelling story and good multiplayer for a Halo game to work, you also need a fantastic soundtrack to seal the deal, and Halo Reach's soundtrack is god tier. It consistently matches the tone of the game and heightens the plot, gameplay and tone. It doesn't feel similar to the soundtracks of the original trilogy, but feels more in line with the one of ODST. I think a big reason as to why I feel this way is because they are used to create a somber tone within their respective stories, and don't contain as many high energy tracks like what we found in Combat Evolved 2 and 3. Whereas many songs in the classic trilogy would get you hyped and ready for combat, most of Reach's soundtrack starts off slow and elegant, then sometimes abruptly changes to a quicker beat, which is perhaps used to symbolise the change in feelings amongst many of the inhabitants of Reach. Whereas they were once calm and collected, panic has now taken over as they realise the planet will soon fall. Hardly any of the songs stay consistent throughout their length, which is another reason why I love the soundtrack so much, because it feels so diverse and less cliched. Overture is a great example, as it starts off with the typical choir-like echoes found in many Halo songs, then suddenly snaps into a quicker tempo, with several instruments and beats playing over one another, then builds to a close, but then carries on with a much slower and atmospheric tempo. Music like this fits the tone of the game so well, because the player's emotions and feelings are constantly shifting throughout the game. One minute you're hopeful, then the next you feel defeated, then suddenly you get a surge of energy to push on, and then you come crashing back down again. The soundtrack isn't all doom and gloom obviously, because it's a Halo game. There were going to be those tracks that get you in the mood for a fight. Tip of the spear is just chef's kiss when it comes to this aspect of Reach's soundtrack, as for me it's the most hyped song in the game that conveys a sense of urgency amongst the UNSC to take the fight to the Covenant, despite the overwhelming odds against them. It's like they know they're eventually going to lose, but they're all going to go down fighting. Even with all of these great tracks, the best use of music in the game, for me at least, has to be Epilogue. To this day it's still one of my favourite pieces of music in a Halo game, just for how well it fits with the scene it's played in, and the context of Halo as a whole. Reach has been building up to this very moment since the beginning shot of your broken helmet on the scorched ground of the planet. You've come this far, taken down hundreds of Covenant, saved hundreds if not thousands of human lives, lost your comrades along the way, were entrusted with getting humanity's secret weapon to its new BFF, safely delivered the package, and now you're all alone, stuck on Reach with no way off the planet. Noble Six knows there's no escape, and yet they stand tall, unafraid of what is to come, and decide to give the Covenant one last fight. Then as Six makes their final stand, it becomes distorted and violent, and then quickly becomes calm and fades away, as Noble Six is finally defeated. Halo Reach for me has a great story, despite not having perfect characters. It's a story about loss, desperation, but also hope. This game didn't need to be made, but I'm grateful that Bungie took the time to tell an interesting story that acts as their final chapter in the franchise, ironically ending where the story began.
Cortana, all I need to know is, did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.